Got Ross Jackson lives, LockedOn Saints as well. Give us some time here on the Jim's Farms Hotline. Ross, happy Labor Day, sir. How are you?
Hey, man, happy Labor Day. I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me on. Glad to be here with you.
It's our pleasure. I want to talk about what Kellen Moore had to say today, but first of all, I want to look at the move today that the Saints made, releasing J.T. Gray, who has been one of the best special teamers in the National Football League in his time in New Orleans. Not a guy that gets a lot of headlines, but certainly has been impactful. Were you surprised, and what do you think this means?
Yeah, no, I was very surprised by this. I actually, over at LouisianaSports.net, I wrote up a story just yesterday about predicting the team captains, and I had J.T. Gray going into his full gold patch fifth year as a captain season, and so I was very surprised by this move. I think for the most part, probably what it comes down to is that the Saints have been doing a lot of these types of moves over the course of the offseason, where they've been moving towards youth, and they've been kind of moving away from players that were a part of the previous regime. We saw that with guys like Isaiah Foskey, as well as Peyton Turner much earlier in the offseason, where they didn't bring him back on another contract. And so this just feels like another one of those moves. Now, the Saints are going to have to figure out what they're going to do at gunner and figure out who those guys are going to be now on both sides, because one of the other kind of big players at that position was Rico Payton, who is now a New York Giant. And so Saints are going to have a lot of new things going on this offseason, and that goes beyond just offense and defense. It clearly goes towards special teams now as well.
I want to stick with special teams, and then we'll get to Kellen Moore. Kai Kroger wins the punting job. What do you make of that? The Saints have had a lot of turnover there since Thomas Morstead was ushered out. How do you feel about the punting situation right now?
Yeah, 4 new punters in 4 years now, 4 over the course of the last 5. And this was another one of those sort of ventures away from what the Saints were doing before. We saw over the course of the past couple of years, Lou Hedley, Matthew Hayball, sort of this focus on a little bit of the Aussie style, Aussie punting style. And now with Kai Kroger, we see the Saints move away from that. So another one of those things that comes with the regime change here. And so I think that we'll see what goes on in terms of, how they're able to sort of capitalize from that. There was some conversation early on about whether or not they might still be looking at punter. There was a conversation about a trade with the team at one point. Could you imagine that, this New Orleans Saints team trading for a punter? Goodness. And so, they've been looking all over the place for it. So if Kai Kroger ends up being the guy, which looks like is the case, it'll be a return to the more traditional style of punting that this team had with Thomas Morstead as well as with Blake Gillikin years ago. But, of course, some kinks and growing pains to work out with a young rookie coming in.
All right, let's talk offense. Saints and Cardinals coming up in the opener on Sunday. We watched intently in the preseason, but we understand that is preseason. You're not running everything, and not everybody's out there on the field. How do you expect the Saints offense to look on Sunday as compared to what we saw in preseason games?
Yeah, I would anticipate for as long as they can, unless the score gets out of control or anything like that, a little bit more of a run-first approach for this team. I was really surprised not to see a lot of the run game over the course of training camp and the preseason. We saw a lot of focus on the passing game, even going all the way back to that 126-play scrimmage that they ran. Over 80 of those were passing attempts from my charts. And so, we didn't see a ton of this New Orleans Saints run game, but we know that that's kind of part of what Kellen Moore does really, really well, is that he schemes up these really effective run games. They did it last year in Philly. They did it for several years over in Dallas as well. And so I would expect to see a little bit more of that. And I think that you're probably going to see the offense kind of build from that. More RPOs, more of those play actions, read options, things like that. The Saints feel very comfortable with both of these quarterbacks, but most namely Spencer Rattler being the starter, of what they can do with their legs. And so I think that a guy like Spencer Rattler gives them an opportunity to be able to open that playbook up a little bit more, lean in on that run game, and then build off of that. That's certainly what I would expect, especially when you're going up against an Arizona Cardinals team that was responsible for the 5th most explosive rushing plays last year. You're going to want to keep the ball away from that offense a little bit, especially knowing that your defense has struggled with run game over the course of the past few years. And so I think that that's something that we'll see a little bit more of, a little bit more motion, 11 personnel, things like that we're not accustomed to seeing over the course of the past couple of years for New Orleans. But I think for Kellen Moore, what we'll see that's different in that preseason is going to be that run game.
I think for a lot of reasons, we all know that the Saints offensive line needs to be a strength of this team. What's your confidence level that it will be?
Yeah, I'm not sure that I would say that I have much of a confidence level in that until we see it, right? Especially once we see it in October. look, offensive line play across the NFL is going to stink in September. I mean, that's always the case. That's the way that it works. The NFL has always kind of been slow in that area. And a lot of that comes down to the lack of ability to have contact in practices and the lack of exposure that a lot of teams allow their offensive lines in an effort to keep them healthy by not playing them in the preseason. And so I think that you're going to see struggles across offensive lines all around the NFL, outside of maybe Philadelphia, when it comes down to what that offensive line is going to look like. And I don't think the Saints are going to be immune to that. They've got effectively three players playing in new positions now, right? Tallahassee Fuanga was a starter at left tackle last year, but he moves to right tackle. We'll see what happens at left guard if Trevor Penning makes it back out on the field. If not, then it's Dylan Radins there, who played right guard for the Tennessee Titans last year. And then, of course, you have your rookie and Kelvin Banks Jr., who was super impressive during the preseason, but now, of course, has to step into some regular season action. And so I think it's going to be maybe a little bit of a slower ramp up for the offensive line, but I think once they're able to strike a rhythm, and of course, as long as they can stay on the field, they should be able to provide what's necessary for this Kellen Moore offense.
Let's flip to the other side on defense. What's your confidence level the defensive line can be a strength?
Yeah, I feel a lot more confident in that one for New Orleans. That defensive line was really, really fun to watch all throughout training camp, which then raises the question, is it that the defensive line was good, or was it that the offensive line was struggling? That's always the big negotiation you have to make in training camp and all that. But even in the preseason, we saw guys like Yasheen Davis and Fadil Diggs go out there and make plays, playing in the roles that you're expecting to see guys like Chase Young, Carl Granderson, and Cam Jordan. And so you can kind of translate that a little bit. But I think one of the biggest places where they're set to make an improvement is going to be in the run game. This is a team that was 31st last year in the NFL when it came to rushing yards allowed. Now they get into this moment with Devon Godshaw having been added, Christian Boyd making some big-time strides going into his second year, and sort of this new look 3-4 or odd front, multiple front defense. I think that there's a lot of good that's going to come from especially Devon Godshaw, who to me could be one of the most important additions this offseason when it comes to helping to make this team a little bit more stout against that run game, which they desperately need.
I know Kellen Moore, not much of a performer in front of the microphone, so I'll kind of leave it open-ended here. Like, did he have anything of note to say now that we're into game week, or just business as usual there in Metairie?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I really kind of took away that was maybe a little bit, buried in his press conference, which, had a lot to do with how hard that JT Gray release was and all these other things, a lot of important stuff in there. But one of the things that he acknowledged was that for the first 3 weeks of the season, you're going to see a lot of things that you can't scout from the teams that you're playing up against, because so much has changed from last year going into this year. But to me, it was the little aside that he said when he said that for him, he knows that Arizona's going to have some of those unscouted things, but they're going to have some unscouted and, things, the new things to kind of show themselves as well. And there was like a little bit of you could see kind of a little bit of a smirk. This guy loves football. And so you saw a little bit of a smirk when he said it. So I think one of the big things that I'm looking forward to is seeing what are those unscouted looks? What are the things that we haven't seen yet? And how effective are they for Kellen Moore? If he's got some things up his sleeve going here into week one, as the Saints seem to be pulling out all the stops from, obviously new head coach, new starting quarterback, new era, and now even new jerseys to open up the season. They're really buying into that they're a new team, they're a different team. So I'm really, really interested to see kind of what that looks like in week one.
Last one, Ross. You've been in that dome a lot of times. What do you expect the energy to be like on Sunday? What do you think the vibe will be like for the opener?
I think it'll be a pretty good vibe. I don't know what it's going to look like ticket sales wise. I imagine, look, they sold out of their preseason or sold out of their season tickets, all those other things. So I imagine it's going to be pretty, full and packed. It's week one of the NFL season. The Who Dat Nation shows up for their team. So I expect that we'll see that. But I think the biggest thing is really going to be, how much the Saints can keep the fans in it, right? There's the sort of beloved nature of them as an organization, but you still got to go out there and perform to get the most out of the fans that are going to be there too. And so I know Kellen Moore and this New Orleans Saints team, they're very kind of, they're very focused on the idea of getting sort of that dome field advantage back, which hasn't really been there for the past couple of years. And so they'll have to go out there and perform in order to keep the dome rocking and present throughout that game.
Saints and Cardinals coming up noon on Sunday. Ross is all over it for LouisianaSports.net, as well as Locked On Saints, wherever you find your podcast. We appreciate some time, Ross, man.
Hey, thank you, man. You take care. Stay safe. Thanks for having me on.
Ross Jackson, Locked On Saints and LouisianaSports.net. Hey, it's Hunt. Thanks for watching Hunt on Saints. Before you leave, help us out a little bit. Hit that like button, leave your comments in the section below, and hit that subscribe button so you get all our content right here from Hunt on Saints. We'll see you next time.